Something I've learned about time management, or rather about time, and I've said this before, it's a lot like money. Time is a lot like money, and it should probably be treated as such. I think time is actually a much more valuable resource, a much more valuable commodity. That's just my point of view. That's my opinion. I think a lot of people would agree with that. You know, some days, some days you're gonna find yourself with less time than you'd like, and you can sit there and you can mourn the time that you could have had. Whether it's your fault or not, and we can look past that because it's kind of irrelevant. I mean, if it's your fault, you have things that maybe you can work on. Maybe it could be helped, right? But it's always important to look past that. It's not about pointing the finger or shifting blame. If you can look past that, you can start to consider. Well, you can start to consider rather than think about the time that could have been there. You can start to consider the time you actually have, and a lot like money, you can administer that. You can administer what's actually available to you, and basically live in the real world. Um, you may not want to admit that you struggle with this. I know that I do, and I've worked on it over the years. But it began with me accepting that I had a problem with it. It's much like alcoholics, right, or drug abusers. They have to accept that there's a problem before they can do anything about it. And I know this is a problem that I've always had, and I had to admit it before I began to work on it, and it's changed my life considerably. And it really just begins with that first step. You take the first step of admitting to yourself. Forget about anybody else. You admit to yourself that you have this problem, and then when you forget it, because you may forget after that initial time, you have to remind yourself. You have to remind yourself that it's a problem that's there, and that it needs to be addressed. The problem of not being able to move on, from basically not being able to cut your losses and move forward, which is really what this is all about, right? Outside of the concept of time and time management.